I'm also the executive director of the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship. And we have been taking our entrepreneurial strategy class. So a lot of the smiling students that are in this class, or depressed students because they're on their third Zoom session of the day, are in entrepreneurial strategy. So it's good to see all you guys. I know it's been crazy time for everybody in transition. And I want to welcome those of you who are joining from the community. We've got a pretty active speaker series schedule. Some of them are combining the entrepreneurial strategy class kind of with folks from the community. So I really welcome your participation, and I thank the students for kind of opening our class to the community, particularly as we talk with folks like Adrian and others about the impact of the crisis on their business and where things are going. And it's really timely. And I think this is a time, this is unprecedented. I think it's a time in all of our lives where the more that we're talking and sharing and communicating, that we need each other to kind of get through this. So let me introduce, I guess at this point, if everybody can, I know some of you are saying before, everybody can sort of mute themselves with the exception of Atirola and Adrian. That would be great. Already I see folks posting from the class and even elsewhere in the chat box to put your questions. It'd be great if you just keep doing that. I'm going to turn it over to Atirola, who is a senior chemical engineering student coming to us from Houston, Texas, who will be our moderator today. I'm going to mute myself and let Atirola run the show. And I want to thank Atirola for your willingness to do this, and Adrian, who is coming to us from Florida, but usually lives here in Cleveland, and is a big supporter of entrepreneurs in the community, supporters of the arts. My kids have played music in his yogurt shop. But I really want to thank you and really look forward to the discussion. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Atirola.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, from whatever time zone that you're in. I'm really excited to hear what Adrian has to say. I'm a fourth year chemical engineering student. And we're just going to kind of roll. I see people have been posting questions in the chat. So if you have questions or as they come up as Adrian talks, just kind of post them down there and we'll try to work them into what he has to say. Because we kind of want what you guys want to hear to kind of lead the direction that the discussion goes in. So I am an immigrant, and I'm sure a lot of other people in the chat are immigrants or children of immigrants. And Adrian, I know you have this like intense refugee coming to America story. So I was just wondering if you could kind of start off like with that, how you came to America, kind of how you got started, got on your feet, and then we can kind of keep rolling from there based on the questions that people have.
All right, sounds good. Thanks everyone for being here today. Thanks for taking part. Atirola and Michael and everyone else at Case Western, thanks for having me. It's always a great time to either be in the class or just now to be here virtually. So I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a great thing to continue the community engagement. You know, this sort of fellowship, coming together with others is really good. It's really important right now when we're all kind of cooped up in our own little places. As Michael mentioned, we got away from Ohio. Whether that was a good decision or bad remains to be determined, but we're in Florida with friends and family, and it's good. We're very thankful. But indeed, unprecedented times for sure. I wish I could say I had more in-depth insight into what's happening right now, but I don't think many of us know, or any of us really knows what is going to happen tomorrow. So we take it day by day, and it absolutely has impacted our business, entrepreneurs around Cleveland, the greater Cleveland area, and indeed throughout the country and across the world. But it's one of these new challenges, additional challenges that we're encountering. And while I don't always agree with the saying, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger, because that's not always the case, I do believe that in this case, there's a lot of learnings, and this experience, when we come out on the other side of it, will indeed be beneficial. And I do have faith that it will strengthen us as human beings, and then as entrepreneurs, as students, business owners, etc. So Thanks for making the introduction. I will start by a little bit talking about my life story, which is, as Atrola mentioned, one that begins with me being an immigrant. It starts with Romania, communist Romania in the 1980s when I was born, and my parents wanting to leave that country for better and additional opportunities elsewhere. That's part of the Eastern Bloc, and for those that are familiar with it, you'll remember that post-World War II, many countries east of the of Berlin, the city that in Germany that was kind of split in half, and indeed actually in four in quarters, with spheres of influence all around. Romania was on the other side of it, along with Hungary and Ukraine and Bulgaria and other nations that were part of the Eastern Bloc and were communist countries from the mid-40s, late 40s on through the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was in 1989. My family had been trying to leave Romania for a while. There were 5 kids in our family. And upon receiving a visitor's visa in 1989, my mom came to the U.S. and was supposed to be here for 30 days. But in the meantime, my father had other plans. He coordinated for us to be snuck out of the country. So he took us, 5 kids, including a small baby that was just a few months old, and sleeping pills to the baby and many layers of clothing to the rest of us. And in the middle of the night, sometime in August 1989, we crossed over into Hungary. And that was still not yet an open and free country for us. We went and we were put into refugee camps. We tried again to go from Hungary into Austria. The first time we tried that, we failed. We were caught. We were put in jail in Hungary and then let go and released and allowed to go back to a refugee camp. We engaged with the American government, the embassy there in Budapest, trying to have them help us get to Austria, which was a free country. It was a country that would then help get us to the U.S. to be reunited with our mom. They couldn't do anything for us. We tried crossing yet again, and that also failed. And finally, on our third try, we made it across, and that was November 14th, 1989. That night, my youngest sister turned 1. We went into the American embassy in Vienna. We were going to be very quickly reunited with our mother in America, in the US. But then, of course, just 2 days before we got there, the genesis of the revolution and the fall of the Berlin Wall was beginning, and all the Eastern Bloc countries started to become free. Romania went into revolution, and on Christmas Day, 1989, the dictator Ceausescu and his wife were trying to escape Romania. They were caught. They were put on a speedy 3-hour trial and then executed. And Romania at that point then was free. And so we had when people talk about immigration and they talk about the waiting list, we had to wait on that waiting list for about a year and a half, and I think in the end it was about a year and 10 months before in 1991 we could come to the U.S. and be reunited with our mom. And we happen to have been the largest family to ever escape communist Romania during that time period. So the story is almost a 2-year saga, and we are very blessed and very thankful for the opportunity to be in America and to make the American dream what many people talk about it being. And we're thankful because we're also surrounded by a community of other immigrants that was there alongside of us from day one. And so we really didn't do anything on our own, but we were surrounded by a great Romanian diaspora and others in the greater Cleveland area that took great interest to help us get on our feet and get to the point where we are today, which is nothing extraordinary other than to say we've tried to do everything we can, everyone in the family, to take advantage of all the great opportunities the U.S. has to offer, from education to being able to be an entrepreneur, to owning a home and property, etc. And in the meantime, to give back and help others that have been where we are or where we were, and help to do whatever we can just to really help serve our neighbors and to move the ball forward a little bit. And so my entrepreneurial endeavors really started with my father's entrepreneurial streak. He was quite the entrepreneur in just this idea of escaping the country and taking on this risk. And I will say that the number one thing that I say you need to have as an entrepreneur is an appetite for and a stomach for risk and uncertainty. I know there are dozens of books, thousands of books around what makes a good entrepreneur. In my experience, perhaps I've done it the best way or not so much the best way, but in my experience, the number one thing you need to have is this grit, and just this ability to keep grinding it out and grinding it out. And when it gets really challenging and when the risks seem just unappetizing and the challenge is insurmountable, just to keep going and going and going. I think that's probably the one thing that I learned from my father, and can apply in business for sure all around. So with all that being said, talking a little bit about background, and getting into entrepreneurship, see my world, and I see one of the questions here, I think is along the lines of, no, go ahead, Netrol.
I just want everyone to message their questions directly to everyone. A few people have sent them to me privately on the chat. Just everyone, please put them in the chat for everyone to see. That way Adrian can see them and the rest of the class and people viewing on Facebook as well. Go ahead.
And feel free to, Etrola, please, as you're moderating this, feel free. I'll do my best to every couple of minutes stop, and then maybe we take some questions, or if anything needs to be interjected or said, we can go from there. But one of the questions that I did see, and I think it's a good place to start, is, hey, were you always an entrepreneur, or did this just come up because of an opportunity that was presented to you? And the answer, that's a really great question. And the answer is that I've always had entrepreneurship in my blood. I remember I was a post-secondary enrollment option student. If anyone knows what that is, state of Ohio has this program. Other states do as well, where in your 11th and 12th grades of high school back then, but now even in 9th grade, you can take college courses. And so indeed, in the 11th and 12th grade, I just didn't go to high school anymore. I just went straight to college, and I started by going to a community college in my first year. And I had a business professor there, Rudy Stralka, and he's actually still teaching. And even then, that was my first introduction to business course. And he would tell me that, Adrian, I see Carl Icahn in you. I see Carl Icahn in you. I had no idea who Carl Icahn was. No clue. I pretended like I knew who he was, but I did not know who he was. And I always had a passion and a desire and interest to be involved in business. And I ended up going the corporate route. So I went to University of Akron. I got an international business and marketing degree, an internship with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, moved out to New York City and worked for Pfizer for 5 years. After spending time there in a number of different roles, went into consulting, both in strategic consulting and private equity, consulting for companies or investors looking to invest in the healthcare world. So I had a healthcare bent on the products side with pharma and biotech primarily, and then moved back to Cleveland to work at the Cleveland Clinic in a group called Cleveland Clinic Innovations, which is the commercialization arm of the Cleveland Clinic, helping to take ideas from physicians or nurses or staff at the Cleveland Clinic and commercializing those ideas, turning them into businesses. And I worked at Innovations for a couple of years, and then went and joined the strategy office, helping to coordinate the Cleveland Clinic's more or less merger and acquisition strategy, partnership strategies with other hospitals, hospital systems, etc. That's kind of a rundown of my resume pre-entrepreneurship. Little pause there.
Yeah, so I just saw it in the chat. I can't find who asked it, but somebody had asked how you kind of transitioned. Anmol, an MS student in entrepreneurial biotech, was wondering how you kind of transitioned from Cleveland Clinic to starting your own company. So kind of talking about, you talked a lot about healthcare, but how does that kind of go hand in hand with what you're doing now with Piccadilly and with Origin Milk?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so a question that was asked by Anmol was, he was kind of wondering how you transitioned from working at the Cleveland Clinic and this healthcare background that you have to starting your own company, and what you did with Piccadilly and what you're doing now with Origin Milk.
Perfect. That's a great transition. So really my transition was one where my brother and I got together, and my brother wanted to start a business, and he said, hey, let's start something together. And I said, great, that's a great idea. Let's do something. We were both full-time in other endeavors, but we thought we could put something together. The idea of Piccadilly, the genesis of that idea was that the frozen yogurt craze had hit, but at that point in time, no one was doing anything organic and offering an organic product and a kind of a unique, different concept that we saw an opportunity to do something not in a suburban strip mall with some fluffy yellow, pink colors and princesses everywhere, but maybe perhaps something in Cleveland that was more akin to something you'd find in, say, Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, or one of those types of neighborhoods. And so we said, let's go to Coventry. Let's offer a local organic frozen yogurt that has no colors, fake flavors, things like that. Let's offer vegan options. Let's do something that is different. Let's have a walk-up location. Let's tap into not just the local ingredients and sourcing movement, but let's target a different type of demographic, not 9 and 10-year-old children, but adults. And we know that the children will come. So let's just have a kind of a different approach to this. And we did that with our first location on Coventry. That was a success. We're very thankful for that. The community really rallied around, and the product we were offering was indeed unique. We're the only people in Cleveland offering a vegan option and an organic option, and people, the customer base there, appreciated that. And so we took the Piccadilly brand and expanded it to a total of 4 locations, with 1 franchise in Pittsburgh and multiple locations around Cleveland. We absolutely saw success early on, and we saw some failures. We had 1 location that after 10 months, the location was not good. It was too early for the place we were in, which was Ohio City. We had to shut that down. That was a really great learning opportunity, a painful and expensive one, but a great learning opportunity. That's really how that happened. It was the idea that my brother said, let's do something. We put our minds together. We did something unique. And then we saw that we could build upon this and franchise or expand it from there. Then I quit my job at the Cleveland Clinic and went and started to grow that business. But in the middle of growing the Piccadilly as a business, I got the idea for Origin, and then started going down that track as well. And the idea then became, let's build these 2 different businesses, with the idea that eventually we would focus on one of them, and whichever one allowed us to scale more and more efficiently and with better prospects, that's where we would go. And so we built both, and now we no longer own Piccadilly. We're focused on Origin Milk, and the Origin Milk company's focus right now is in fluid dairy products that are exclusively from A2 Guernsey breed of cows, which are the highest quality producing breeds of cows in the world. And so we have what is known as the highest quality milk in the world, period. But this is just a stepping stone. The first 3 years so far of the Origin Milk Company have been for us to work out supply chain and figure out distribution and build the basis of a brand. But the focus was always on potentially developing an infant formula. And that's where we find ourselves today, which is a completely scalable business, something completely different than the fluid milk world. And so to go back to that question, I transitioned from corporate into entrepreneurship with just an initial idea, the catalyst being my brother, who said, hey, let's do something. Us coming up with an innovative idea, something that was not in the marketplace that we felt people would want. So a product that we were offering, a local organic product, both dairy and vegan initially with Piccadilly, that no one else was offering, to a target demographic that we understood very, very well. So there was an unmet need that we came to fill. And we grew it from there. And from there, there are many iterations of a business. And you see how your business ideas evolve over time. And that led us into sourcing A2 Guernsey milk. And that led us to launch the A2 Milk Company with the idea of being in the infant formula business, which we are not in right now, but which we are developing very actively. And so sometimes you see the opportunity present itself and you just go for it. Sometimes you have an idea and you work really hard at it. But overall, what I would recommend to anyone is that get some corporate experience early on. It's great. But if you think you have an entrepreneurial drive, don't wait too long to execute, because the younger you are, the easier it is for you to do that. And it does take 5 to 10 years to build a business. It does take time. And it also depends on what your goals are. If you're a small business owner and that's what you like, you're an operations person and super hands-on, then great, you can build that, and that probably won't take 5 or 10 years necessarily to build and make successful. I found out very early on that I'm not an operations guy. I'm much more the strategy, guy and building a brand and something around that we can scale. And so for me, it's taking it to the next level and finding the appropriate partners and then the appropriate exit down the road. That would make sense.
So that's actually a pretty good segue into the question asked by Bob Fowler, who is a sophomore finance and international business major. And he was asking if you think you would have been able to grow Origin without outside investors if you hadn't met the people that you met while you're at Piccadilly.
So we don't have outside investors currently. We are working right now with a number of potential investors, but in terms of one leading to the other, Piccadilly absolutely led to Origin because our supply chain for our local organic yogurt came through a number of farms in central Ohio, in Ohio's Amish country, which I was very keen on finding so that we could make our own local yogurt and ice cream, etc. But in doing that, I tried very many different kinds of milk and didn't understand that milk quality is determined by breeds of cows. And as I learned that and I started doing more and more research into it, I discovered the unique qualities of A2 Guernsey milk. And at the time, no one in America was selling anything like that. And so my thought was, let's build a brand around this milk, superior quality milk that has superior taste, superior nutritional profile compared to any other milk, superior genetic profile, which is the same genetics as human milk, meaning that 80% of people who are lactose intolerant or have a dairy allergy or real symptoms thereof can drink this milk without a problem. And this breed is a heritage breed that is an intense grazer and a very efficient grazer, making the impact on the environment a lot less. So 30% fewer methane emissions into the environment compared to any other dairy. So we started talking about, hey, we are a cleaner dairy solution, and regenerative farming practices that we put into place on top of that really help to turn the clock back on some of the environmental impact of industrialized dairy farming. And so we found our message, we found the core story of our product, of what defines why we are unique. And the Guernsey breed has just this abundant, the story is just fantastic. There's so much there that you can lean on, again, from taste, nutrition to genetics, the environmental impact. So we found a great story, a product that has a superior quality than anything else out there. And so when you couple that up, those two things together, you've got a really great product and a really great story. You've got to take advantage of that opportunity. So many people are looking for those two things to be able to make turn into a business, but a lot of times it's difficult to find those two things together. You can find a really great pair of tennis shoes, but there's not much of a story there. There's a really great quality, or you've got a really great story, but the end result is maybe not a super fantastic product that stands out compared to everything else. In A2 Guernsey milk and the various derivatives there, whether it's in fluid milk or in powder with a protein powder or with an infant formula, you've got a really great product. Undeniably the highest quality milk of any in America, period. That's not us saying it, that's independent tests that say that. And then you've got that great product, and that great product has really great story behind it. You find something like that, bring those two things together. The only piece of the puzzle that's missing is getting that out there to consumers. And especially this day and age in the food world, you get that out to consumers, and it's something that resonates. And we've seen absolutely resonates with consumers.
So I think that kind of also goes hand in hand with a few questions that some people have put into the chat. So Eric Pomper wanted to know if you could share some of the techniques that Origin uses to find and connect with local farmers that really uphold you guys' mission and understand what the company is trying to do.
Absolutely. So one of the things that makes us unique, besides the exclusive focus on the A2 Guernsey breed, is the fact that we also really care about local sourcing, and we know that consumers care about supporting their local farmers. And so what we did is we said from the get-go, what we're going to do is we want Origin to be a national brand, but a national brand that is always local. So this is how we defined it. We said, let's be the first dairy company that is always sourcing locally in every market that we are in, meaning the definition of local can be somewhere under 400 miles. Actually, most people focus on the definition of local being before you had refrigerated rail cars or refrigerated food trucks, how far or how far away could a product go if it left early in the morning to get to market, that is what we lean back on now as the definition of local. So if it can be put in something that's not refrigerated and it takes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever hours for it to get to a local market, we lean back on that and say that that's maybe the definition of local. So that's anywhere from about 250 to as much as 400 miles maybe. And indeed, in the food world, it is the refrigerated rail car that changed absolutely everything. Just an anecdotal example. Before refrigerated rail cars started transporting food, the state of New York itself, upstate New York, had 171 varieties of cherries. Now, if I ask you to think of 4 varieties of cherries, could you even think of them? I doubt it. Most of us can think of like 1 or 2 different kinds of cherries. And there are about 3 or 4 that we focus on today, because once you had refrigerated rail cars, the scale that you could then undertake, so instead of bringing just local cherries to market, then you could focus cherry production in a number of states, such as Michigan or Washington State. And you can have large orchards there producing a lot of cherries, and then you focus on 2, 3, 4 different types of cherry trees, and there you go. So we lost a lot of biodiversity and diversity in our food sources once we had refrigerated rail cars. And that's just as a side note of one of the things, perhaps the most impactful thing in the last 100, 120 years in terms of food and the food industry and food entrepreneurship was refrigerated rail car. So when we wanted to connect with customers on a local basis, we said, look, let's create the first true local dairy co-op. And so if you have a Organic Veale, for instance, you've seen Organic Veale milk, that is a co-op. That means that there are thousands of farmers that come together. They own that company. They have a board that a number of people that they put on that board that represents the interests of those farmers, and they together own that company. So we said, well, that's great, but that milk comes from Wisconsin into Ohio, or if it goes from Ohio into Pennsylvania, or from Pennsylvania into Florida. It's shipped all over the country. So why don't we do a local co-op? Very difficult to pull off, but we feel is very defensible and has the opportunity to be long-lasting once it's built. So what we did is we said, okay, every market that we're going to be in, we're going to find local farmers, local processing, local distribution to stay within that area. Not necessarily state lines, because state lines are man-made, but within 300, 350 mile radius of where the farms are. And so our idea, to get back to answering the question in regards to how did we set this up and what was the idea behind bringing milk to market, we always wanted to be local. So we have operations right now in central Ohio that take milk into Ohio, parts of western Pennsylvania, and all the way into Illinois, into Chicago. We have a hub in eastern Pennsylvania in Lancaster County, just outside of Philadelphia, with a couple of farms processing and distribution into Philadelphia, New York City, and Washington, D.C., and the surrounding markets. And we have a hub in just outside of Denver in Colorado with a farm and processing and distributors out in the Rocky Mountain region. And this year we're working, if all goes well, to either do something in Utah or perhaps in Texas or one of the central states, Nebraska or Kansas. Most likely we'll, if all goes well, pull off one more of those markets, perhaps 2, but that remains to be determined. And so our growth plan was an always local growth plan, because then wherever you see, say this was the Origin bottle, wherever you see this in whatever grocery store, you would see the same label, but in the bottom you'd see in the bottom corner you'd have the outline of the state that it was produced in, and it's going locally into that region, again probably somewhere around 350 miles or less. And so for us, the way to get to market was to connect with local consumers, because we feel like that's the best way to support local farmers and the community, to keep the money there in those specific communities, to connect the consumer with that farmer, to be able to do visits and visit the farm, etc. And when you think about in any industry that you're talking about, food, software, marketing services, consulting, etc., as an entrepreneur, what you really want to do is understand your customer really, really, really well. I say start with the end in mind. And for us, that's always been the focus. What do we have to offer? We have to offer this great product with a great story. But what we really tell store buyers and others is we understand the demographic that we're serving. We understand them very, very well. We understand what's important to them, and that's what we're bringing to them. And it's important that you start with that from the beginning. If you're building an app, if you've got some software, again, if you're offering a service or you're building a new tennis shoe, understand who your target demographic is and understand that customer really, really, really well. If you can articulate to investors, to buyers, to others that you understand that customer and you're offering them something that is a true unmet need, or something that they maybe is not an unmet need, but they want, and that you really get inside their head, that can take you a very, very long way. Because as simple as it sounds, believe me, so many companies, so many entrepreneurs, but particularly so many big companies, they just have lost touch and they do not know what the market really is asking for, who their demographic really is, and how to effectively communicate with that demographic. So it's important to always stay very, very close to the customer base.
So that being said, I'm sure we all know about the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it's the reason we're on Zoom right now and not in person at Case. So I was wondering if you could kind of speak about how that has affected your business and what steps you've had to take to adjust to this COVID-19 pandemic.
Sure. So it is, I don't have words to describe it. It is just remarkable where we are today and what we're going through. I have to say it's not unexpected. I think anyone who takes a step back and looks at the world in general, looks at history, would understand that once every couple of generations, something like this can indeed come along. Perhaps we didn't think it would happen in this modern day and age, but here we are. And so the long of it is that this has had an impact on everyone, us included. We have had both good and bad. So on the good side, we are here offering food to folks who need food right now, who are forced to stay indoors and are not visiting restaurants or getting food at the cafeteria at school. 52% of food consumption in America, this is a real stat, 52% of food consumption in America is done outside of the home. And so you can imagine now that grocery stores are struggling to keep up. This is just unprecedented for them to have to offer this much food and keep that food on grocery store shelves. But it does present an opportunity for us because the core of our business, 85% of our business, of our sales are through grocery stores. And so we have an opportunity to plug holes now where others aren't able to be there. And we have an opportunity to continue to grow our business while offering, again, friends and neighbors and consumers something that they need, whether it's milk or cheese or butter, etc. And so that's been a good opportunity. On the flip side, the 15 or 20% of our business that is food service, meaning restaurants, coffee shops, etc., that is zero or almost zero today. And so that is unfortunate, but that being said, we do see that as these things will change in the next few weeks or next few months, that business will likely come back and people will absolutely be still doing catering at corporations or at Case Western Reserve, and the cafeteria will open again, and coffee shops will be opened, etc. So we've been impacted by it primarily as it deals with corporate catering, corporate contracts, and coffee shops and restaurants. And it was an inopportune time for us as well because we had 3 or 4 really great potential new accounts that we've been working on for months, and that we were supposed to execute on, and we're going to be actually all of them together, had they come through, would have been kind of game changers for us. And hey, we had to put a stop on it because they said, let's not go now. We're not saying no, we're just saying we have to delay certain things until the right time presents itself. And so that's where we are today. Again, we are thankful that we are in this in the food world, where unless the government shuts down grocery stores, which is really, really unlikely, we will probably continue and potentially have some good opportunities along the way. So tapping into, say, low interest loans right now is a good opportunity for us. We can refinance some of our corporate debt. We can absolutely show that we've been impacted by coronavirus and tap into some small business administration loans and stimulus package type of things. And so it's a good opportunity for us to look at those programs and see how we could utilize some of those funds to help not just maintain the business, but grow it throughout this crisis. So it's a good time to look at it, not just from the negative side, but the benefits and see what you can do to be helpful.
So when it comes to growth and expansion, Michelle Handoko is wondering if you guys have a different strategy for areas where A2 milk is already sold versus areas where A2 is not sold. So how do you go about tapping into those different markets?
So when we started, we were the only ones offering A2 milk anywhere in the country, but very soon after we launched the A2 Milk Company, which is a large, I think market cap's around $12 billion Australian-based company, entered the US market with what we would call a generic A2 milk product that comes from black and white Holstein cows that is not superior in taste, nutrition, or environmental impact. It only has the only offering there is that if you can't drink regular milk, then you can drink A2 milk, and it's essentially a lactate play. So they're in over 14,000 retail locations throughout the country, which is very different from us. We're 300 or 400 locations altogether. And so now with the commercials on TV through A2 Milk Company and the placement in many grocery stores, you can get A2 milk in different parts of anywhere in the US. But for us, our focus is not on being the next lactate. We don't want to be like the A2 Milk Company. We don't want to be that milk for people who can't drink regular milk. We think that's silly. We understand that that's a niche, but that's only 20, 25% of the population. Our messaging is, hey, we are the highest quality milk and dairy that you can buy in America, period. And that's true. Why? Because the Guernsey breed of cow produces a milk that is less water and more components, higher component count, and that's what determines quality in dairy. And so what we're able to say is we are the highest quality dairy in America, and what we're doing is indeed very different than what the generic A2 Milk Company is doing, or other companies that are coming along to offer an A2 product. And just to make sure that everyone understands, A2 simply speaks to the genetics of the protein of the milk. And so I'll take a step back and define it. All mammalian milk, all mammals, horses, goats, cows, humans, anything that's a mammal produces milk with either the A1, A2, A3, or A4 proteins. What happens is the natural protein for all mammals are either the A2 to A3 or the A4 proteins. The A1 milk protein is a genetic mutation that only has occurred in cows. And so cow's milk is the only mammalian milk that has the A1 milk protein. The A1 milk protein is not digestible by human beings. And so when you ingest the A1 milk protein, your body creates an enzyme called BCM7. And BCM7 sets off a chain reaction in your body that causes inflammation and causes the slowdown of the motility, the movement of the food throughout the digestive tract. And what that does is it gives you symptoms such as gas, bloating, headache, diarrhea, stomach pain, constipation, etc. And when you present to a physician with those types of symptoms, doctor 9 times out of 10 will say you're likely lactose intolerant, have a dairy allergy. So lay off the dairy for a week or two and see what happens. You lay off the dairy, you see that you feel better, boom, doc says, see, that's it. You had a lactose intolerance or dairy allergy. When in fact, 80% of people who have real symptoms of lactose intolerance or dairy allergy, it's a masked issue. The real issue is that they can't process the A1 protein, and the BCM7 reactions that happen in the body then set off those symptoms. And so the difference there is that if you drink an A2 milk that has no A1 protein, you're fine. But you can arrive at A2 milk in one of two different ways. You can find the black and white production Holstein cows that make up 98% of all dairy in America. You can find the roughly 15 to 20% of those Holstein black and white cows that are still have just the A2 milk protein in them that have not mutated, and then you can bottle that milk and sell it. Or you can focus on a heritage breed like the Guernsey breed, who is still almost 100% A2. There are very few Guernseys out there that have mutated. And so if you bottle an A2 Guernsey milk, those people that otherwise would have symptoms can drink it without any problem whatsoever. But what has happened is the A2 Milk Company has come out. They're using Holstein, black and white Holstein cow's milk. It's standard fat content. It has to be, the quality is indeed so poor that like every other milk in America, it has to be fortified by vitamins A and D. Our milk does not have to be fortified by anything because it's nutritionally more superior. And so what happens is you could have what we call a generic A2 milk that just tastes like any other milk, looks like any other milk, but it's just a genetically A2, which means you can drink it if you otherwise have issues. So I'm saying all that and given the background, just so people understand the context and the differences, but also to say that we differentiate because we don't want to be simply a generic A2 milk brand for people who have lactose intolerance or dairy allergy. What we want is we want to position ourselves as a superior brand, the highest quality that also happens to be A2. But at the same time, the A2 Milk Company has marketed the term A2 in such a way where people equate that, seeing something that says A2 on it with superior quality. And that's okay. We are benefiting from that aura as well. But there is a distinction there that should be made. And it is impactful and important, but we're glad to take advantage of of people knowing more and more about A2, generally speaking.
So MK Ford asks, so with this coronavirus situation, a lot of people have kind of been seeing it as a wake-up call for their unhealthy lifestyle habits. And in result, do you think that once this kind of settles down and the economy returns to normal, there will be a higher demand for origin milk products because of this heightened sense of unhealthy eating habits and lifestyle habits?
Perhaps that's a good question, and perhaps that's something that would happen. But I see that the opportunities now for us are maybe I should say twofold. So there are stores that are running out of product. So they're not, Costco's only selling one case of milk to each customer. Stores are running out of cheese or butter. So there is an opportunity for us to go into some new accounts and say, hey, we've got supply. We can furnish you with additional milk or cheese or butter, whatever you would need, and sort of take advantage of it that way, in a good way, right? We're bringing a product that others can't bring to market, and it maybe opens doors into new accounts. That we haven't seen that happen yet with a brand new account, and that's probably because the buyers at these stores are so busy with other things. They're probably not thinking, how can I get a new product in there and kind of start fresh throughout this crisis. It's just easier for them to go to their current suppliers and just say, look, we need more, give us more. And so perhaps they haven't gotten desperate enough, but when we get to that point where they say, hey, we just need any source of milk or butter or cheese, etc., we will connect with them at the appropriate time and then be able to bring additional product into new markets. And then the idea would be that when the crisis is over, that the customers we've connected with will say, hey, we want to continue to buy this. So they'll ask their store to continue to make it available to them, or they'll see that sales have gone well and those buyers will say, yeah, let's keep going. So that can absolutely happen. We're actively working on making that happen right now. And that's a good way to move forward and grow sales even throughout the crisis. But at the same time, we haven't seen people pull back. So we haven't seen grocery store sales take a dive or our sales take a dive. People that are out there buying or were buying our product are continue to buy it. Will the coronavirus change their buying habits? Will they be more health conscious moving forward? Perhaps. I wish I could say that, hey, A2 Guernsey milk cures XYZ thing. It does not. So we can't go out there and say anything like that. But will it help you? Is it better for you? Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope that whatever the catalyst is, be it coronavirus or something else, people thinking more about the quality of the food, where their food came from, local sourcing, etc., is great for us and for all other food entrepreneurs. We invite that. What I think, though, on the food side that's going to be interesting is that we're seeing right now is having a conversation with someone in New York City yesterday, and they are a door-to-door delivery, not an Instacart, but a small distributor that has several hundred accounts where they're delivering weekly basis milk and other things. And they've made a really good brand. They've done some great branding around this idea of home delivery before, early on, 15 years ago, before it was really taking off around the country. And what they're seeing, though, is they're seeing that, people are really considering things like local sourcing and being more closely connected with their food sources so that they're not stuck and asking questions when something like this happens. If you're part of a CSA, community sustained agriculture kind of community, if you know your local farmer, if you've been sourcing from some local farms, then when something like this happens, you're connected to the source. You're not waiting on Whole Foods or Trader Joe or Heinen's or Giant Eagle or whoever to bring you product to market. So those that have been part of a CSA, those that are connected to a local distributor that's doing in-home delivery, or that have gone out to visit a farm, they're finding that this is really great because they have those existing relationships, and their family is probably not running out of stuff. I have our guys, the farmers that we work with in close partnership, that called me and said, Adrian, if there's anything you need for you and the family personally, don't hesitate to let us know, because we have our finger on the pulse. That's really great. That's a reassuring thing to know, that right now, if I need eggs and they're out of them at the store, I can just drive down, and 50 minutes I can be down there and I can pick this stuff up. And that's not an advantage that I have necessarily because I'm in this world, but many of us can do that. When times are good, we can go and meet local farmers at a farmer's market and get their business card and keep in contact with them and patronize those businesses. And then when things like this happen, we have a fail-safe or a backup, right? That we can reach out to someone and say, hey, I have been a good, loyal customer of yours through the good times. Now it's some rough times. I need XYZ thing. And I bet you those suppliers, those farmers will be glad to connect with you and to help in times like this. So I think some things are changing or will change in the food system a little bit around the periphery. But here's what I've seen in New York City in the conversation I had yesterday. People are no longer concerned about glass bottles, for instance. So getting glass bottle milk was a big thing because of the sustainability. They didn't want to have plastic. Right now, interestingly enough, all those diehards that were, only on glass bottle because they thought plastic was bad for the environment, zero of those customers through the conversations we've had with distributors and others are asking for that. They're just saying, just give us whatever you have. That's an interesting dynamic. Another interesting dynamic is at corporations, a lot of the co-sharing space, a lot of people had mugs. So we're talking about, people making coffee, putting milk in it. Hadn't thought about this until yesterday. All of that has gone away. No one is sharing mugs and washing each other's mugs, in the pantry, at least not in New York City and in some of the other markets where we've had conversations. And so there's probably going to be a reset around a few of these things, some of the communal things we do or others. I think there's going to be a reset around the way we handle food or the way we engage with one another, if not for the next 3-6 months, but maybe even longer, because people will probably be a bit more conscious about how they're interacting with others and their community, if that makes sense. Let's take a break there and see what people have to say about that. I think that is something that it's an interesting dynamic that I hadn't thought about again until the last couple of days and was more real yesterday, speaking with folks people in New York City, and they're getting hit pretty hard. And so I do see some changes afoot in markets like that. Michael, I'd be interested to see what you have to say about that.
I didn't mute myself. Yeah, I think this is a really trying time. I think your points about networks and communities are really important for the students and folks that are listening. I've been reading a lot of stuff. I teach a class on entrepreneurial finance, and there's been a lot that's written this week about capital markets and venture and sort of entrepreneurs, being, no one ever calls my home phone anymore. There we go. Right during my Zoom session. And sort of how do you rely upon networks and relationships that you've built over time, because it's about people coming together, and it may be suppliers doing things differently, just given what's happening. I think we're seeing over the last week lots of really, whether it's on our campus, folks coming together around the crisis, trying to help the healthcare system sort of get ready, just little, tokens of kindness that you're hearing about with people and folks in the service industry. But because we don't know how long this is going to last, I think your point around sort of we talk a lot in this class about networking and even sort of using LinkedIn and connecting with people in this time period where we can't actually meet for, I was talking to folks even sort of this week who are the normal thing would be hey, let's go grab coffee. Well, we can't do that. But what are the other ways? So I think this is a really interesting moment, I think, for the world as we think about networks. Obviously, we have the power of platforms like Zoom to sort of come together. But I think it's really interesting to kind of hear for you, whether it be your Amish suppliers, your grocery partners, like what kind of these networks mean. And, you know, I know you had answered before that you haven't raised outside capital. I mean, what is your view right now on kind of, as you think about going to the capital markets to support what you're doing, how has it changed in the last kind of week and a half or 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we'll get back to talking about community once you jog my memory about a few different things that I'd like to mention. Then I also saw a question from maybe Sean Jose from 109 asking about why choose the dairy industry and focus on finding healthier alternatives for milk, which is a great question, and it's very apropos. But let's talk about capital markets. So we started our fundraising round sometime in August of last year. We said, look, we want to get to the point where we've established the brand and sales, and we can then raise funds for infant formula. So the whole idea of raising funds is not necessarily to push forward what we're doing on fluid milk, but to be able to launch into the infant formula world, because that requires several $1 million. And so we started that process, and from the get-go had really great engagement just from building out the network, from cold calling, from cold emailing, and just spreading the word. We got many, many no's, but we got engagement. So people saying, hey, no, it's not the right time for us. It's not the right product category for us. It's not the right thing, but please keep in touch because we're interested in what you're doing. It sounds like an interesting value proposition. And so we've had good engagement from the get-go. And indeed, we've gone through the diligence process now with 2 funds and on a 3rd one. And what has happened in the last 2 weeks is that has just come to a halt. No one has said no, that we were part of the diligence process with, but they've said, hey, let's just put this on hold. Let's just see what's going to happen. So if you parse out the different sources, the VC guys, venture is still sitting on money. They've got money and they pretty much have to spend that money, right? They've got that fund. If that fund has not been allocated, they've got to make sure that they allocate those funds. They can absolutely sit on some of those funds, and they are right now because they have put money aside in those specific funds to be supportive of the companies that are already in their portfolio. So now they are directing some of those funds to keep some of those companies alive and going, right? So they are absolutely dedicating some of that money there, but they do have still money in funds that have not yet been dedicated, and they're looking for an opportunity. But I think their investors right now, their limited partners do understand that right now money's going to sit on the sideline for a couple of weeks or perhaps a couple of months, and are not expecting that money to move. It's a little bit different than, say, if you're running a bond fund or a hedge fund or even a PE shop, where yes, you've got money in those funds, but it's okay to be in cash for quite a bit, right? If you're in cash, if you're a hedge fund right now and you're in cash, you're probably, most of the cash, you're probably doing really well through this. But if you're a VC fund, you've got to put that money to work, right? Because you've got a limited time where you've got to return that money back to your limited partners. And so it's good news and bad. Obviously, everything is going to be on hold. But the good news is that as we come out of this, that liquidity will likely come back. And venture has seen, especially food venture, has seen very good 3, 4, 5 years. And we expect that will come back, that money will come back to work. But no one has come back and said, hey, we would have said yes last month, and we're saying no now. That has not happened. So that's good. And then you've got the banks that, government is saying, hey, we want to pump liquidity out there. We want to cover payroll. We want to cover this and that. And right now, I'll give you a very real live example. SBA has an emergency fund outside of coronavirus that they've always had. You can tap into $2.4 million at a max of 3.75%. You just have to show that there was some kind of emergency, some kind of, act of God kind of thing that you can tap into at any time, and they will allow you to borrow money at, with government-backed loans at low interest rates. And so we're considering, should we do that, and should we do that now? Or should we wait and see what the stimulus package looks like and see what that funding can look like. And we don't know, is it better to just get something now from SBA emergency funds and then also get something later? Are you even allowed to do that? So we're kind of trying to parse through that right now, talking to folks at, say, Greater Cleveland Partnership, which is the Chamber of Commerce for the Greater Cleveland area, and others, asking them, hey, how can we navigate this? Help us navigate this so that we apply for and take advantage of the right thing. And so in that, again, I don't think there's anything wrong morally or ethically with the idea of saying, look, we have some existing debt. We can take advantage of this opportunity to also refi that debt in a way. And then, we have some expenses that we want to continue to pay, our payroll, et cetera, but we also want to invest. So our infant formula consultants, we need to throw, $10,000 at the next level of project. Well, if we're able to do that with borrowed money with some low interest loans, and that helps move the ball forward 2 months from now, let's say 2 months from now, 6 months from now, whenever my VC conversations come back online, I can show them what I did in the interim. I didn't just sit around and just wait, say, look, we got some other sources of funding. We put $10,000 or $15,000 behind this, and we moved the ball forward on our infant formula development by 5%, 10%, 15%. That's good. That's what the VCs, I think, will want to see, that we didn't just sit on our hands and wait to see what happens, but we pushed hard to make something happen during a difficult time, to grow sales, to invest into something without their money. And I think that just makes us that much more attractive to them on that end. And we're working on that right now. We're trying to finalize our formulation. That's part of our IP. If we do that with our own money in the next 2 months or so, then my pitch deck looks a bit better, because now I've got IP around my own formulation that I was going to do with investor money, but I figured out how I can do on my own.
So kind of going back to the sustainability topic you talked about right before this, Ariel had a really good question, and some of these words kind of go over my head. She's a biochem person, but I'm sure you'll understand what they mean. So she said, this is something that I thought about when you talked about selling your milk in glass and plastic bottles. As you may already know, riboflavin in milk is light sensitive, and when it's exposed to light, it can initiate oxidation of milk and affect the taste. Have you thought about paper-based cartons based on those effects?
Yeah, absolutely. Paper would be great. And we like paper. But it does two things that we're not super crazy about. One is it's really expensive once you have a bottling system that goes into plastic or glass to switch to another one. It costs at least $150,000 to change the bottling system. So to go into paper right now, we'd have to invest about $175,000 to switch over, because it's a completely different system. We don't have the access to that kind of capital, nor do we think that that's the best play for us right now, to invest capital into those types of things. At the same time, what it also does is paper would mask the color and the look of our milk. So Origin milk is the only milk on the grocery store shelves that is yellow in color. And indeed, milk should not be white. So for anyone out there who has never seen milk in, say, other countries, in the vast majority of other countries and other markets, milk is not white. It's a yellowish color. And that's what the color milk really is. The reason in America and in other industrialized nations milk is white is because we've messed with and modified those breeds of cows that are production cows so much that they're now producing between 10 and 18 gallons of milk per day. That is not normal. A cow should never produce between 10 and 18 gallons of milk per day. We've only done that because we've turned cows into factories. And so in so doing, we've watered down the milk. And one of those things that we water down is fat content, protein content, other nutritionals, but also the color of the milk. And so milk should be an off-white, yellowish cream color. That's the original color of milk. Part of the reason why we called our company the Origin Milk Company is because it answers the question, what was milk like in its original form? And one of the things that makes our milk distinct is its color. It is this golden Guernsey hue. If you compare it on the grocery store shelves to anything that is in glass bottle or any other kind of plastic see-through container, you can see that our milk is 5-6 shades darker. And it actually changes color throughout the various seasons based on what the cows are eating and their lactation schedule, etc. And so if we went into paper, it would mask that color, which is one of the distinct characteristics of our milk that helps us stand out on the grocery store shelves and that draws people in. And people just look at it and say, yeah, I wonder why that's a different color. And when we do demos, we'll take a organic glass bottle milk that's super expensive and everyone thinks is the best, and we compare it to ours and say, look, which one do you think has more good stuff in it? The white colored, watered down, that has vitamins A and D synthetics added to it, or this, and you shake it up, and 10 times out of 10 people say, yeah, I get it. Your milk has more components, has more stuff in it, because I can literally see it. And so we use that to our advantage by saying, hey, that is one of the characteristics that is a visual representation of the quality of our milk. And just remember this, the whiter milk is, the lower the quality.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to say that's maybe 2 or 3 more questions. A question that has been asked a lot in the chat by about 4 or 5 different people is kind of the transition between Piccadilly and Origin, and kind of like the lessons that you've learned from Piccadilly and how you applied those to Origin.
You know what I learned at Piccadilly, probably more than anything else? I learned operations, and I learned how I am not an expert in operations, nor is it really my thing. And so, there's a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins that I'm sure Michael has read and others have seen. It was a good book. It talked a lot about making sure you focus on the things that you're really good at, or putting the right people on your team on the good opportunities, not on things that you think could be improved but have great potential. So for instance, for me, I learned operations. I learned how to work with employees directly. I learned how to set up systems and training, etc. But I learned that is not what I'd want to do or what I'm best at. And so I'm not going to focus on that. So I really learned to apply things operationally then to Origin. And it opened up my eyes to say, look, retail business has its challenges, and it takes the right kind of person to overcome those challenges and to be good at it. Even working with franchisees, which I thought, hey, that would be really great. I can go out there, sell the concept. Franchisees would come in. I can get them excited about it. They could start their own shop, and I can help them. But the support that you need to give them operationally, not just marketing and strategic advice, but really operations, ongoing tweaking of systems, how you can make them better and more efficient, is just not something that I'm talented at. And so I decided that, hey, that's not the route for me, not the way to go. I'll give you a quick example. I enjoy teaching, and I think I'm a fairly decent teacher. Whether it's teaching my kids or teaching others, I like the engagement, the interaction, and being in a classroom is great, no problem. But when it comes to training and training employees, I don't enjoy it, and I'm not good at it. I just can't do it. And I never thought that there was a difference between teaching and training, and there absolutely is. And I've defined and thought about why that is, but there's a difference between teaching and teaching a class and training an employee to do something. And one I like to do, I enjoy doing, and I think I'm okay at it. The other I don't enjoy doing, and I'm not good at it. And so it's really good to learn those things and then to apply them and go from one to the other. Real quick, I want to address this idea about finding healthier alternatives for milk from Sean. That's a really great question. And so we thought about it like this. There were so many businesses that have been started in the last 15 years or so, where entrepreneurs have come out there and looked at legacy industries and how those industries could be turned upside down, what innovation you can introduce there. So there's so many stories. I read Fortune and Forbes and Entrepreneur and Small Business and all these other magazines and articles and essays and on Medium, et cetera, about someone just taking a step back, looking at an industry and saying, that industry is ripe for disruption. You just name it, right? One story is a couple of guys, the 2 guys that were at Harvard getting their MBA, and their professor did a case study in ketchup, right? Stop me if you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, get the case study because it's brilliant. So the professor says, look, you want a hard business, nearly impossible to break into or to do anything interesting in. This was about 2007, 2008 timeframe. He said it's ketchup. Why? There are two main brands, and they own 98% of it. It's Heinz and it's someone help me, Hunt's, I think. And that's it. These guys have supply chain, distribution, transportation, retail shelf space, etc., and that's it. And he said this is probably one of the hardest consumer packaged goods businesses to break into, if not the hardest. And you can find the case study that he used with his MBA students. So too bright or dumb, however you want to look at them. I look at them as both bright and dumb, because it does take a little bit of ignorance to break into something like this. These 2 guys were like, really? That's the hardest? That's exactly what we're going to do. The professor tried to talk them out of it, say, no, guys, don't waste your talent, your time, money, energy on this. Do something else. They said, nope, if that's the hardest, this is what we want to do with our life. So they start something called Sir Kensington. And Sir Kensington, you might have seen it. If not, Google it now. It's got this little British-looking 60-year-old gentleman with a little eye glass thing, and they started this brand of ketchup and mayonnaise, etc. And they said, let's redo the product in this space. And they started it. They started a brand. They got it in Williams and Sonoma. I think it was the first account through a food show. They got placement. And I don't know, don't quote me, but 4, 5, 6 years later, they sold out for $100 million or $200 million to XYZ brand. And now you can find Sir Kensington in thousands of stores. And of course, it was one of the big brands that bought them out. And they launched a revolution almost in that world. You know, you had ketchup and you had mayonnaise, and now you've got dozens of flavored mayonnaise, different flavors of ketchup, etc. And so they looked at the stale legacy industry that had two major brands that controlled almost the entire market, and they came into something disruptive. And on their heels, many other entrepreneurs came, and then in that condiments world just changed things around. One guy started a salt company because he was inspired by what they were doing, and he has something like 48 different flavors of salt, and he's making many multiples of millions of dollars selling flavored salt, which really wasn't a thing before he came around to do it. Two other guys wanted to start a business, and again, they were MBAs, post-MBA, and they said, well, let's just walk through a Walmart or a Target and see what we come across. They came to the sock aisle. They looked around, and they said, ding, 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 this is it. This needs disruption because all the socks look the same. And so they started putting, you know, pink princesses on men's socks and all kinds of weird and funky different things. And sure enough, I was in London for a meeting when I was in consulting, and there were very serious British gentlemen around the table wearing suit and ties. And when they pull their pant leg up and you look at and you saw the socks that they were wearing striped, you know, pink and purple socks, etc., funky socks. And now that has become a thing. That's not even noticeable anymore. There are a lot of business guys and professors and doctors that are wearing funky colored socks. And these guys launched a sort of that innovation and disruption in that market. And so what we saw happening, to answer Sean's question, to go back to this, is we saw that the legacy dairy industry was ripe for disruption. We think that absolutely it's great for people to be drinking alternative milks. Nothing against almond milk and all these other brands. The only thing I do have that I can say you should be careful with is that they're highly, highly processed. And that processing and the other things that are added to it kind of mess with the whole idea of getting back to nature. But I understand the kind of knee-jerk reaction to go to plant-based as opposed to dairy, and I'm not knocking it at all. But at the same time, in this legacy dairy industry, as Dean's, the largest dairy company in America, filed for bankruptcy a couple months ago, a lot of the legacy players are on the downturn. And what we see will happen is, in any industry like this that is sort of waning and going down, it's not that people will stop to drink milk or consume dairy. They won't. But what they'll do is more and more they'll reach for unique brands that connect with them, that speak to them, that have a story, that have a unique quality or fulfill a niche market. And that's what we're here to do. We're saying people will continue to drink milk and consume dairy. We just think they're going to make better choices about what they're going to consume. So we want to be part of that conversation moving forward. And so that's why we didn't move into an alternative milk company. Yeah, we probably would have gotten a lot more funding and would have been easier in the last 3, 4, 5 years to get on grocery store shelves. But we think that there's absolutely going to be a place and a market for dairy, and we're staking a claim on superior quality in that space.
Okay, so we only have time for one more question because we only have about 5 minutes left. So I guess the question I saw on here that's always a great one to end with is just kind of what you think like the biggest challenge and biggest lesson learned out of everything that you've been doing over all of your entrepreneurial endeavors is, and what your biggest takeaway is.
That's hard. The thing that I'd like to say, or maybe start out with, is to say I have no idea if my entrepreneurial track was correct or not. I look back at it, and a lot of times I've looked at it the last few years since I quit my job at the Cleveland Clinic almost 6 years ago, and I look at it and ask myself, man, what am I doing? Did I do the right thing? when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the thick of it, when you're faced with all these different challenges and risks, etc., you ask yourself, should I have done something different or not? I think you won't know until you come out of it on the other side. And so I don't know is the best way I can answer it right now. I'm not the guy to stand up here and say, oh my goodness, look at what I've done. I've created this amazing thing and everyone is like going crazy over it. That's not the case. I honestly, I don't know. What I can tell you is that if you've got a passion for something, then absolutely go after it. You may not end up sticking with that thing. It may not end up being just like Piccadilly led to Origin, which led to something else, which will lead to something else. It may not be that thing. Follow that passion and see where it leads you. Do so with all the wisdom that you can muster from those around you. Tap into professors, your parents, others in the business world that can give you guidance, and take all that guidance in. But at the same time, if you're doing it right, most likely along the way, many people will tell you you should stop or that you shouldn't do it. You have no idea how many people have told me along the way, no, don't do that. Why would you risk that? Why would you try that? Or how many people have come and said, stop, don't do that, or have put up a challenge to say, yeah, that's it, you can't do this. And when you're an entrepreneur, you look at the answer of you can't do and you say, that's not an answer. In the corporate world, and I think others that are on the line that have been corporate will smile, chuckle when I say this. We had projects at the Cleveland Clinic, at Pfizer Consulting, where we had been working on something for a few weeks or a few months. And the end result was, this is just not going to work out. And we were all paid our salaries during that time and everybody worked hard. It just wasn't going to work out. And that was an outcome. And it was an okay outcome. In the entrepreneurial world, you can't take no for an answer. That cannot be an outcome because that means it's not going to work. And so you're either iterating another iteration thereof or just pushing forward when everyone is telling you no and saying, no, but this is going to happen. This has to happen. And then you creating a way that no one else has created before to make it happen. And I'll give a quick example. That was with our labels. We went to the state of Ohio to get Origin A2 Guernsey milk labels approved. You know what they told us? No, you can't have that label approved. We don't know what A2 means and why you want to put it on there. Plus, and this is very real, they said, if we let you do that, why shouldn't we let everyone else do that? What if your milk gives the impression that it's superior to others? And I looked at them and said, no, it shouldn't give the impression. It should absolutely be true. This is why we're doing it. I want to be able to put A2 Guernsey milk because it helps me differentiate. And they said, well, isn't that unfair? They said, isn't that unfair to other farmers who don't have A2 Guernsey milk? Wouldn't that be unfair to them? And I said, no, that's not unfair at all. That's the nature of competition. I'm taking time, painstaking energy and money to do something unique. Let me do that. And they said, no, we don't want to do that because what they want to do is they said, hey, we don't want to be unfair to other farmers. We kind of want to have an equilibrium. All farmers should kind of be the same. And I said, I'm sorry, that's what communism is. That's what I left. That doesn't work here. We're not going to do it that way. So I pushed and pushed and pushed until we were the first people in America to have a label approved by a state agency, which is the Ohio Department of Agriculture Dairy Division, to say, no, I will educate you on why A2 is okay, and it's okay for me to put it on there, and why it's unique, and we'll test it and go and push forward to create a pathway that did not exist. That regulatory pathway just did not exist. It was there, it was possible, but it hadn't been done. And so have the stomach to forge forward and to push for something to make it happen when others tell you it's not possible. And if you can do that, and if you can stomach it and hold on tight, and if you can have a good support system around you, because it's not just going to be you, it's going to be a team, then I think you can make it happen and you can bring it to fruition. And that's what I encourage anyone who's on the call to do. If there's something that you're extremely passionate about and that you know is an unmet need or you know consumers want, try to make that happen, bring it to market. And no matter what hurdles you will run across, and you'll run across many of them, and no matter what risks you take on, if you have the stomach to keep pushing forward and the tenacity and the grit, you'll make it happen.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. Everyone on mute. Let's give a round of applause.
Except for me. I should unmute everybody. That was great. Adrian, thank you for doing the moderating. And we do have a couple more slots, students, for upcoming speakers. So let me know. It was a good experience, and Adrian did a great job. Adrian, thank you for sharing the journey. It's inspiring. I think I was even just messaging a couple of the students about even summer internships. There's so much that's kind of up in the air right now as large businesses, small businesses kind of try to make sense of this. I do feel like entrepreneurs in these moments of crisis, and Adrian, you're a great example. It's like your positivity around ways that this is an opportunity, I think speaks to your wiring. Everybody's not made like this. I mean, so many of us are this is a really challenging time, and it's hard to know kind of which way is up. But I hope you guys sort of take away as we sort of, learn more about kind of the entrepreneurial mindset, and that, even in these like very difficult times that we're all sort of facing, like, what are the ways forward? And, I'd encourage you, I mean, part of this is what do you take away from kind of Adrian's message as we learn about and study entrepreneurship, but part of it is, how might this apply to your business or your job search or your startup ideas? So, Adrian, thank you for taking time to share with us, and we wish you the best of luck with Origin, and can't wait to get updates along the way, and particularly as we hopefully make it through this crisis.
Appreciate that. Hey guys, let me leave you with one thing. I just came across that I think it just came to mind, and it's just such a great, it's a really great thing that I'd like for you guys to think about as you go into entrepreneurship or you're in the corporate world. You guys maybe have seen the RX bar. It's a nutritional bar that was started by a guy named Peter Veale, and they launched, and then they sold out after 5 years. They grew it to 125 million and sold for 600 million to General Mills. And I'm going to put this into I don't know, how can I'm trying to chat.
Email it to me, because I'm gonna shut down the chat, and then they may
got it.
Just send it to me and I'll put it on the announcement.
They set up a fund called Litany, and here's how they define the fund. I'll tell everyone. Litany is a word, a noun, and litany means this: it's a humble lion, an entrepreneurial individual who intrinsically possesses the combined paradoxical characteristics of emotional, intellectual humility with confidence, discipline, and grit. So the paradoxical characteristics of intellectual humility with confidence, discipline, and grit. I think that's so great. Be humble and surround yourself with other people. Let yourself be moldable. So have humility in everything that you do. You don't know the answer to everything or anything, but then also have the discipline and grit to push forward. I think that's so great for entrepreneurs and everyone else. Walk humbly, and then have the discipline and grit to push forward.
Awesome.
I'd leave it with that.
Great way to end it. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for those in the community who joined. We will share this recording later, and we'll be back on Tuesday at the same time at 1:00 with Mike Belcito from Product Collective, and who's an adjunct at the Weatherhead School of Management. So look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks a lot, Atirola and Adrian. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.